Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and give everybody a couple more minutes to log on to our workshop. I am happy to be introducing the Resume Tips workshop presented by Ebony Pearson, who is with the MTC Los Angeles Job Corps Center. Ebony's professional background includes public relations for workforce development, programming, facilitation of leadership development for adults and youths, and academic advising. She is currently the Business and Community Liaison at MTC Los Angeles Job Corps Center. Through this workshop, participants will review how to build a resume with tips on tailoring to different industries, an overview of what to avoid and what to include in a resume, and an introduction to what Job Corps is and what resources they provide. So is everybody excited? Let's see in the chat. I want to see a lot of yeses and a lot of you are enough. And Ebony, I'll turn it over to you. Welcome.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I will, let's see, share screen. And we'll open up the PowerPoint here. Great, looking good. Great, wonderful. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining this session. And I hope to provide you with helpful information to guide you in designing a good resume that you feel confident with, that will help you get an interview and help you get a job. So we've done introductions. I'll jump right in. Oh, let me see here. Okay, I wanted to start off with discussing our circumstances. It's important that we are aware that we are still in a global pandemic because of COVID-19. We recognize that because it influences the job market. And it also means that it has created social distancing still, and that everything is practically online, which is how we apply for jobs and even job interviews. And this also leads to a more competitive job market. And what I mean is, for the regular job, any job, it's not just a young professional or a well-seasoned professional. It could be anyone competing for the same job. And that means regardless of your age, your background, education level, there's so many people who lost their jobs. There's a lot more of us that are looking for a job. And so it's very important that we recognize that, not to be intimidated or scared or stressed out about it. It just means that you have to do a good job about preparing yourself to be the best candidate there is when it's looking for a job. There are three types of resumes. There is a chronological resume. A chronological resume means that you're listing your work experience from the most recent to the oldest. And the most recent is usually at the top of your resume, and the oldest position is at the bottom of the resume or towards the bottom. A functional resume means that you may have had different types of jobs and you can put it all in there and it's okay. Sometimes we think we can only make our resume one way, but there's different ways. Combination, which is very common and probably easier to do, is you can put all your work experience in your resume from the most recent to the oldest, and it could be different jobs listed on your resume. And that's totally fine, because sometimes we have to convince people or the employer we have a wealth of experience from different jobs because we've had different skills, and that's totally fine. So in your resume, there's basics that you should have. So I'm going to go over the basics with you. At the very top of your resume, what's usually common is that you have an objective. Your objective is the goal regarding the position or your career. What that means is if you have a desire to be a secretary, the objective could be that you are what you could write, if it's addressed to the employer, is I'm in search of a position where I can become a successful secretary, or I would like to utilize skills, administrative skills to fulfill the secretary position. So this objective would change according to the position. If it's a different industry, a different job, you can change it, and that's totally fine. Sometimes the objective is not specific to the job. It could be a more broad objective, like saying, I have a desire to be a successful employee with a long-term future for a great organization. That's a more broad objective. It just talks about your desires as a future employee with growth in mind. Education. Education varies per person. It depends on what you've completed. So I've listed a few examples, such as your diploma or a high school equivalency. It could be a degree. It could be a certification, licensure, or even permit. I mentioned these options because not everybody has the same education, and that's totally fine. I think I see a raised hand. Does that mean there's a question? And
There actually is. I have a question that it's asking if they already have a resume, can they, you help them tell them what's wrong or right with it?
I want to, but that would, I think it's best. Well, so I will say is, I've done that for students in our program, and I've done that for friends. What I would recommend is if you know someone who's done a resume before, it would be good for you to ask them to check it if you're comfortable. And the only reason why I wouldn't personally check it is because that would open the door for me to potentially open the door to a lot of people who might ask me for this request. And I naturally want to, because I think I'm really good at it and I can spot it, but I think you can always go on the internet, and then at the end of this presentation, I think you may feel more confident in reviewing your resume. So that's my answer for now, but we can also discuss a little bit later about recommendations of how you can get your resume looked at, because there are online options as well. Okay, I'll go back. So another question? Okay, we're good. Okay. Okay, great. So for education, and I was talking about how people have different educational backgrounds. And also what you can consider is sometimes you could be studying and looking for a job. That's fine. So when you are studying, let's say you're in high school or you're in college or you're in a trade program, it would be considered in progress. So usually when you list, let's say if it was a high school diploma or a degree, you would put next to it the year that you finished it. But if you are still studying and you're working on it, that's fine. You can write next to it in progress. It lets the person know that you are currently studying that discipline and that you're not quite finished yet. But it's good to list that, because sometimes people, it could be their first time in college or they're working on another degree. You can put in progress, because that might make you stick out compared to another applicant. And that makes you more desirable because they notice that you're studying as we speak and you still want to work. So that's something to take into consideration. Moving down to skills, there are two types of skills. There's technical skills and there's soft skills. Technical skills vary by industry, and technical skills can include things like your forklift license, a commercial license, like if you can drive a school bus or a truck, having your first aid, CPR, or even ServSafe. People who work in food might have a ServSafe certificate. These are things that you had to study and most likely take a quiz or a test. And then you got a specific card or permit or some type of document that shows that you're certified in this skill. Soft skills are character traits that affect your ability to do the job well. Soft skills, anybody can have soft skills. And sometimes it's easier to talk about your soft skills because you can think about the type of jobs that you've had and who you are as a person. So some examples that I've listed for soft skills are, you could be a team player, you're punctual, attentive, a multitasker, or a fast learner. On your resume in the skills section, when you have technical skills, you want to bunch those together. And when it comes to soft skills, you want to bunch those together. It wouldn't be good to mix them all up. Just visually speaking, when you look at a resume, it's good to separate them. Especially like, for example, if you were in the computer industry, you're going to put computer skills, like the specific kind, together so that they can see it. So you can also use these like throughout your resume in one section when you look at skills. Work experience, that's the meat of your resume. When it comes to work experience, it's your previous jobs or even your current job. Sometimes we want to find a new jobs even though we're still working, or we don't want to leave a job until we find a new job. You're going to list that in your resume. When it comes to work experience, you should be listing, usually in part of the heading at the top, it says the employer's name, the location, like the city, and then it'll list how long you've worked there, usually by the date. So you'll see some examples when I go through the slides of what this looks like. I added this section because these are optional additions for your resume. Not everybody uses them. It depends on you. But for example, awards. Sometimes people add awards to their resume because they got a certificate or they did something great. It's okay to include that in your resume because sometimes that makes you stick out. And the awards don't have to be a trophy. It could be a certificate. It could be either or. An award is like, if you consider it an award and you know what it is and you're proud of it, it's okay to include that. And then you don't have to if you don't want to. Leadership. Leadership is used interchangeably with community service or extracurricular activities. But sometimes people are involved in things where they use different skills that they never used before, or it's something different from work. You can list that on your resume. Community service is obviously things that you've done for the community. It's sometimes unpaid experience. Leadership and community service, they can be listed in the same heading, or you can use them vice versa. I say that because some people consider community service leadership, and I believe so that it is too. Community service and leadership could be anything from volunteering at the church. It could be helping clean up a park. It could be anything like helping tutor students. There's really no limit to what we consider leadership and community service because it's about making a difference in your community. So then you can list those things as part of your resume. Extracurricular activities, that means usually for students, doesn't matter if you're an adult or a teenager, it's activities you did outside of class. So it could be after school programs, it could be weekend programs, it could be before school, it could be sports, it could be music, anything that was an additional study for you to do that you had to balance with your schedule. And even cheerleading is considered an extracurricular activity. So I'm giving you these wide range of examples of what you can consider. Something that's different that you don't always see is memberships. Depending on your industry, memberships can help you be more desirable. So a lot of more elite professions in academia, or actually even if for a trade, if you are in a union, a trade union, or there's even caregivers that have a union as well, you could say that you're a member of a specific union or organization, professional, or even in school. If you were a member of a certain club, you could do that. That's for like maybe a high school, but for an adult, you can include these memberships because the employer will then see, wow, you took it upon yourself to join something, to sometimes learn more about your field, to gain some leadership skills, or maintain information and be aware of what's going on in your field because you became a member of an organization. It's usually to your benefit. And then lastly, presentations. Presentations are more so often for people who do that in their work very often. So if you went to a conference and you did a presentation, and this usually includes public speaking, or nowadays, like we're here online, if I'm doing this presentation online, I could potentially list this on my resume and said, I did a presentation or workshop online through Zoom, for, let's say, 30 people for a parent empowerment day. And that's an example of me listing a presentation on my resume. You can use it for different scenarios if it was an in-person conference or online, but it's a way to highlight something special that maybe not many people have done that you can include on your resume. So this next slide includes an example of a resume that I've seen. It's an entry-level resume. Your resume does not have to look exactly like this. It's just an example that I'm using so you can see of a one you can reference. When I look at this resume, and if you can see it closely enough, and if you're using your phone, you might be able to stretch your screen out to zoom in. This individual's resume, it shows that they've highlighted their successes. They include small summaries with bullet points. They use numbers to describe their capacity. They listed their skills to match their job qualifications, and overall, it's very neat. I mention these things because it doesn't matter if you've had one job or if you've had 100 jobs or if you've had a job for 20 years. It's about your presentation and what do I see when I look at it as someone who's going to be in the hiring process. You can see that it's nice and neat in every area. Everything's aligned. When it's out of order and it doesn't look good, that person may not feel so comfortable with wanting to invite you for an interview. So these are things to consider. Are we doing good on questions so far? And if you guys think of out there, if you have questions, you can ask them. I'm completely fine with answering your questions as we go through the presentation.
There's currently no questions in the chat. You're doing great.
Oh, awesome. Okay, here's another example of another resume. I liked to use this example because if you look at this example, if you look closely, this is a student who may not have had a job before, so they didn't really have any work experience. But what they did, because they're a student and they're studying, they used what they know from school as their experience. So it lists that ABC school in some town quickly became a trusted assistant known for can-do attitude, flexibility, and high quality work. And then they listed the different things they did as a student. So I think the strategy here was, even though they may have never had a job, they talked about how they're a good student. And it helps the reader see there's a lot of potential for them to be a great employee. So the things that I listed as what do I see are education in progress that's relevant to the position. So you could say, maybe you have a desire to be an electrician. You're not an electrician yet, you're in school. Well, you can list that you're in school, which I mentioned before, which is in progress, and that you have a desire to become an electrician. I see a hand. We have a question?
Yes, Ebony, we have a question. The question is, I just became a CNA and my work experience was as a cashier. Do I still put that experience on my resume?
Yes, you can, because work experience is work experience. And this is how I would say you can spin it. CNA is, I think, clinical nursing assistant, which I'm sure you had to take a lot of tests and you have to study a lot. But as a cashier, you weren't necessarily in the medical field, but you worked with people. And that's what a CNA will do. You will work with people, and the same customer service skills you have as a cashier, you will need those skills as a CNA. Because when you work with people, you want to have a pleasant attitude, exhibit patience, attention to detail. Cashier, same thing, attention to detail. They have to make sure the register is correct and they're not short, because they might get fired because you're missing money. So the same level of responsibility, you want to translate that from, even when I was a cashier, I paid attention to details, calculated monies, exhibited good customer service skills. That can translate to you being a potentially great CNA because you have real world experience working with people. So yes, you can do it. It's just about how you describe it on your resume. Awesome. Let me see. I think, so the few points left I have on here is I was mentioning that they have a potential for growth and they work at a school with not so much prior experience, but we talk about potential for an employer. If I have 2 applicants, there is one applicant who could be older, who's worked in the field for a long time. There could be another applicant who's younger, may not have as much experience, but depending how their resumes look, if I invite them both to an interview, it depends on how they sell themselves. And that's just like your resume. How are you selling yourself through the resume? If the older person with a lot of experience seems stubborn, like they know it all, I may not want that. And maybe the young person with very little experience has a really great attitude and says, I want to learn, I'll be here all the time, I can't wait to work for you. That employer might pick that person. Not to say that if you're older with a lot of experience that you're not hireable, you absolutely are. But we have to consider our attitudes, and our attitudes also translate through our resume. So you have to believe in yourself, and then that will come through in your resume. And always, it's okay to ask for help. Like this presentation today, I hope helps you and understand, regardless of your background, there's a way to write it and sell yourself the right way. Next slide is common mistakes. So I have seen a lot of resumes from adults and students, and this is what I discovered to be common. Spelling errors. Because a lot of us use a computer and there's auto type, sometimes the computer will change the word because it thinks you're trying to spell a certain word and it's the wrong word. And there's a lot of words that sound the same when you read it, but they're a different meaning. So you have to review your resume, take a break, because sometimes our eyes are tired, make sure there's no spelling errors. Also, don't make your job descriptions too long to the point they're overflowing and they're like big paragraphs. That's not a good idea. I know sometimes it's harder to condense when we did a lot of work at one job, but there's a way that we can shorten the sentences to be very direct and make it a short description. Repetitive details. Sometimes you have a work history where you had the same job at different places. Like if somebody was a baker at 3 different bakeries and you feel like you do the same thing, try to change up the language per description, because when it's exactly the same, it gets a little boring for the person reading it. And it also makes us think that maybe you were lazy and you didn't want to change up the words. So try to avoid repeating exactly the same thing. Lack of qualifications. Sometimes we want jobs we're not so sure we're ready for, but don't make it obvious. So if you're lacking in certain areas, you don't have to say that you incomplete or I don't have. Talk about what you do have and word it in a way so that way it looks like you have the ability to learn, or you have the attitude that you're willing to be able to fulfill the position and the responsibilities. Another point that's very common, and it happens with modern technology, is poor alignment in organizations. Not everybody has a computer, not everybody has the internet. Sometimes we have to go to someone's home, the library, go to work, or if you have a computer at home, sometimes we change the different type of applications on the computer we use. When you rechange the format, sometimes everything gets messed up and moves around. Make sure when you're going to send it that it's in line and everything is the way you want it, because sometimes the files, depending when you open it, can change. Another point is irrelevant work experience. So I mentioned how it's okay to have different types of work experience on your resume, but let's say you have you had 5 or 10 jobs and there's one job that you want. If in your work history, you have half of your work history was related to this new job that you want to pursue, put that work experience in your resume and leave out the other stuff. So if you worked, for example, if someone worked for 3 schools, but before they worked at a school, they worked at a Taco Bell, and then they worked at Office Depot, you don't have to add those 2 other jobs that have nothing to do with the school if you're pursuing a school job. because we want to focus your resume on the relevant work experience. If you didn't have very much experience, that's a different scenario. Then you might want to add those other jobs. But like we use the CNA example, make sure those job descriptions are worded in a way so that you have transferable skills to this new job. And transferable skills are often soft skills. Like I mentioned before, you're a team player, you're patient. You can use that in any job, but make sure it's the way you write it. Last 2 points, outdated references. It's a really bad if you list a reference and their number is disconnected or the email is spelled wrong. I had a student who he sent false information, and then when we did the reference check, the person said, "I've never met him before. Who is this?" And that's embarrassing because we may love your resume, but then if you lie on a certain section and the reference isn't right, we won't hire you. And that's not a good sign. So if you do have a reference, references can be family, friends, or professional. Make sure you let them know that you listed them as a reference when you're applying for the job. So if the employer calls them and they say, "Hey, you were listed as a reference for James McDonald." "Oh, yes, I know James." They'll ask, "How do you know James? How long you've known James? And what capacity have you worked with James?" They'll have a list of questions for the person you listed. So make sure you let them know that they're a reference for you. Make sure if you haven't talked to them in a long time, you talk to them so that you have the right contact information. And then lastly, too much blank space. I see this happen a lot when people are nervous about not having a lot of experience or skills, and they have half the page blank with white space. That doesn't look good. You also don't want to space it out too much where it's obvious that you don't have much experience. I think it depends on the size of your font, the alignment of the page. And another way is that you can go online and look for different templates. These are pre-made resumes where you can update your own information on it. Try to find one that you think would fit nicely for your work experience. So that way it doesn't look too empty. Let's see.
Ms. Pearson, we are at our halfway mark, ma'am.
Oh, thank you so much.
Very welcome.
I added this section called independent contractors because I realized in this economy, a lot of people have become independent contractors, and we have a lot of non-traditional independent contractors. Long time ago, an independent contractor was someone who worked from home, or they were a consultant, and they sought out clients or customers. They created their own rates of pay, and it was project-based. Or you could even be a plumber and be considered an independent contractor because you don't work for the company, you work for yourself. But nowadays, what I find that there's a lot of people who are Uber drivers, Lyft, Uber Eats, delivery services. We've seen an uptick in these type of jobs because of the pandemic. And there's a lot of people who had worked part-time on the side, working for Uber or Lyft or delivering food. How do we put that on a resume? Because you're technically an independent contractor. So I've listed on one side of this where it says job description. This is the job description for Uber. It says, and this is what they were looking for when they described the job. It said, well understanding of Uber's software use, able to respond to passengers' calls and track them based on the data provided in the app, able to receive and follow passengers' locations via the app, as well as plan the best, shortest route to passengers' destination safely. I listed the job description because we can use the job description to help us write our work experience on a resume. Because sometimes we've had a job that was from a long time ago, we forgot what we did at the job. We can go on the internet and Google that same job, and you'll find job descriptions. You can pull that information from the job description, put that in your work experience. So in this example, I showed you the Uber job description, and now I'll show you an example of work experience as an Uber driver. So I've listed Uber driver, independent contractor, because that's technically what you were. It says, let's see here, make sure I can see my screen. It says demonstrated ability to deal peacefully with unforeseen circumstances or delays and use advanced driving techniques to better improve time management and safety. So this is a very nice way of saying that you drove people around, but because you're driving human beings around, you had to be safe. We're not driving reckless. That's how you would lose your license and get in an accident. Another part here says drive the VIP to various destinations upon request with knowledge of various cities and efficient routes. A VIP could be anybody. It could be someone who was a celebrity or just wanted to be very special. They listed it in a way that makes me feel like, wow, like, I wonder who you drove. Like, did you drive someone famous I know? I don't know that. I mean, how would I ever find out? So you could put that, it could be the truth or not, but you never know. And at the bottom, it says neat and smart appearance, customer friendly, and intellectual individual with desire to exceed expectations. So that part, we're talking about soft skills. These are things that could apply to any job. You could be a doctor, a dentist, a trash man. You could work at a drive-through, and you would want a neat appearance, and you would want to be customer friendly, and you want to exceed expectations, because those skills you can use anywhere, and that will help you succeed anywhere. Oops, let's see. So that was one example of independent contracting. I'm going to show you one more. And I'm also going to go over what I just talked about, when the difference in skills. So this one's a little bit more neater, and either or example is fine. They listed their position, which is Uber driver. Then they listed the company, which is Uber Technologies Incorporated. Then they put the city and the state. And then to the right, you see the dates that they worked. This is also a traditional way of how you can list your work experience, because we want to know what was the position, who did you work for, where did you work, and then how long did you work there. Something to notice is that if you worked very short time somewhere, you don't have to put the same year. If you work somewhere for 1 month, you can write the month and the year. Or if you worked, let's say 3 months, you can put the month, like March until May of 2018 or 2020. You can change how you list the date. So it's just something to consider. So let's see here. So I highlighted communicated, because that is a soft skill that's important. Maintained vehicle clean and in an excellent condition, provided all-time excellent customer service. Excellent customer service. They use the description excellent, not just regular customer service, excellent customer service. Loaded and unloaded vehicles, identified and took the shortest and fastest route, and demonstrated the ability to remain calm in a stressful situation. There's a lot of jobs that we have, even as a parent, because as a parent, you shouldn't be hurting your kids. We have to exhibit patience in the stressful situations. So anybody could use that example in your job description, your work experience. And it's something that's very appealing from the employer's perspective. Also, it says followed navigational directions from GPS. That seems more technical. Calculated the right fare, also technical. And executed multiple administrative tasks as required. Achieved and maintained a perfect 5-star Uber rider rating. So the achieved and maintained a perfect 5-star, that was something extra in this example that someone decided to add to make them stick out as a really great employee, which is totally fine. Sometimes we want to list things to make us stick out because it's, like I said, it's competitive. So what are you going to say to make that employer want you over the next person they interview? This is a section that I feel like is important, that a lot of people should know and a lot of people don't realize, is that you need to remember unpaid work experience is experience. It's okay if you weren't paid. There's a lot of people who do a lot of things for free, including babysitting. Like if you've always babysat someone's kids or family's kids, that's technically work experience if you want to list it on your resume. So for example, I list internships. Internships, it could be as an adult or as a student. If you're an intern, you can list that as relevant experience in your resume. Volunteer work, community service, I had talked about that, how that could be a separate section. Sometimes when we have a lot of work experience and we have a lot of community service, we list work experience and then we list community service or leadership. And you can list both, or if you're worried you don't have enough work experience and you have a lot of volunteer experience, you don't have to type work experience, you can write relevant experience. And then the unpaid work that you have done before, you can put it in that category of relevant work experience. Events are a very common thing that people are a part of. They help set up, break down. Maybe you worked at a table or you helped sell something at an event and you could have did it for free. You can list that event as work experience depending on what you did. Always make sure to include the dates, details of the task and the purpose. You know, why did you volunteer? What was your responsibilities? What did you accomplish or what did you help do? Try to remain in contact with the people who you were involved with at these events or community service. Sometimes the people we know get a new job or they don't work there anymore. That's fine. Sometimes you have to just list that. When it comes to a reference, you can just find someone else that you know that can speak good about you, and that's what's most important. And then also, like I said, if it's not paid experience, it could be unpaid experience, but we can list it as relevant experience. Great. I see the chat seems very busy, or like that's a lot of feedback, I think, hopefully good. Points of good practice. These are things that I think will help you have less of a headache when you're trying to keep a resume. Keep a folder if you have a computer. Keep a folder on your flash drive or on your computer or even the cloud. A cloud is, I'm not even a tech person, but it's an online way of keeping your stuff that's not on your computer, but on the internet. You want to make sure you know where it is. So that way, no matter how long it's been since you've applied to a job, you know where to find your old resumes. And I say old resumes because you don't want to use the same resume over and over again. You want to make sure you're tailoring your resume to the new job. And sometimes that takes time and we don't feel like it, but it makes a difference and it helps you be more successful in trying to get that interview and trying to get the job. You can find job descriptions from your prior jobs, like I mentioned, to tailor your own job descriptions in case you forget what you did or you can't think of the type of language you want to use for describing your job description. We want to use adjectives common in the industry you're pursuing or simplify the description for the employer to understand. So what I mean is if you were a cook and you know a lot of cook vocabulary, like in the kitchen, I use the words dice, mince, fry, steam, but I'm applying for a library job. If I'm sending this resume to the library, I may not need to use all of the technical words or vocabulary from when I was a cook. You could just say, helped lead chef with multiple duties in a fast-paced environment. And I may not break it down with all the cooking words. Why? Because the library may not even be familiar with like that job. But if I had that cooking job and I was looking for another cooking job, then you can use the vocabulary from the cooking industry, because that employer who's in the field that you're trying to stay in, if you're talking to a cook and you're a cook, you're going to use the language that cooks speak. And that makes them confident that you know what you're talking about and you really do have the work experience. Like I said, by industry, it depends. There's medical terminology. There's language we use within administration or academia. It just depends. You want to tailor your job. You want to tailor the job descriptions according to the industry, and it's really helpful. And then lastly, in this point is be concise. It's two words: be concise, be direct, be clear. Sometimes people write too much. When you write your resume, you're not using the language and writing as if you're talking to someone, like literally. You have to use the type of professional language on your resume so that it looks appealing and it looks professional. So hopefully that's clear. And I feel like, are we doing good on questions? I don't see any raised hands. I don't know how the
We
chat.
do have one question,
Sure.
Ebony. The question is it true that a resume is best in one page?
Great question. So I've heard that too, and I've tried, and it's so hard, depending on how much experience you have. I would say, let's say it's for a really competitive job, and you may not know how many people are trying to apply for the job. But let's say you know there's a lot of people applying for the same job. If you can fit it in one page, that might be convenient, and it's easier for the committee or HR to process it, because they can look at it and say, wow, they fit this in one page and they have all the experience that I'm looking for. Great. And it gets processed faster. When it's 2 pages, you're like, oh man, another page. Oh, I see why. And they have the relevant experience. So there's no yes or no for that answer. When I had a job that was looking for 5 to 10 years of experience, that can be harder to put into one page, especially the higher the pay. So if it's a higher salary job with looking for more experience, you could try to fit it in one page. But sometimes when they want to know that you have a lot of experience and they have this list of all these requirements and qualifications, you can go over one page, because as long as you're including the relevant experience that makes you look like the best match, it's okay to go to 2 pages. I have not seen 3. When we talk about lengthy resumes, then you need to consider a CV. A CV is a curriculum vitae, and that's used more so in the school professor settings when they have been studying for years and they have a list of things that they wrote, like books and articles. That's a curriculum vitae, which is a CV. That can be multiple pages, but we're not using that for your traditional jobs. Now, a professor who's trying to get a professor job, they might do multiple pages too, but you have to consider the job. So hopefully I hope you get my point that it just depends. It depends on the job you're pursuing. You may do 2 pages, you may do 1, but don't do 2 pages of the same thing over and over again. It just looks like it's redundant. That's not appealing. So I would say tailor to the different situation. Sometimes 2 is fine if it showcases what you need to showcase. And 1, if you can do it, that's fine. And then sometimes be careful. If you want to reduce it to 1 page, don't cut out too much to the point that they didn't realize how much you really know. Because if they've never interviewed you and someone else included more information and you didn't, then, oh, maybe they'll pick that person to interview instead of you. And that's not fair to you, because you had all this great experience that you could have listed. So just keep that in mind. Great. So the next slide talks about my employer, which is LA Job Corps. So, but before I go to that slide, are there any more questions about resumes, of what to list, any type? Because I'll answer those questions now before I go into who I work for and what we offer to the community.
Ms. Pearson, I also
Right.
wanted to just chime in really quick to let you know we are at our 10-minute mark.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, so at this time, we don't have any questions, but I think it's just there is so much information, it's so much useful information. And just to let everybody know, this actually is being recorded, so it's going to be available to the participants at a later time. So in case you missed a piece or something, but definitely keep the questions coming. We have 10 more minutes, so we can help you out with that.
Awesome. Great. I will go over to the next slide. So LA Job Corps, I'm going to tell you about LA Job Corps. LA Job Corps is a free program, and we are governed by the Department of Labor. And we've been around for many years, I think since the 1960s, but not everybody has heard of Job Corps. And when I first worked for Job Corps, I hadn't heard of them either. I see a raised hand from Maria Vasquez. Happy to answer the question if it's there. Let's see. Oh, well, so no question. If there's no question, I saw the raised hand, but I wasn't sure. No? Okay, great. So I was saying Job Corps has been around since the 1960s. We are a free program. I've worked for them for, gosh, maybe 7 years, and I've worked at 2 different sites. We provide the high school diploma or the high school equivalency, diploma equivalency, which the equivalency is usually the GED or the, I think it's literally called the equivalency, HSE, which is by test. So if you don't go through school, because we provide online schooling as well to get your diploma, we can help you prepare to take the test so that you can test out to get your high school equivalency. We also provide vocational training. The vocational training is everything, well, not everything. Every Job Corps offers different trades. So at LA, for example, we offer, if you wanted to become an electrician, a dental assistant, a pharmacy technician. We had a welder program, and I'm not sure we're still offering welding, but we have CNA, LVN, CMA, which is medical assistant and not nursing assistant. There's a medical office, which is when you learn how to run the front or the back. They're different jobs, but they're within the same field. How to computer repair, automotive, and office administration, which is like learning your basic computer software in Microsoft Office. So these are the vocations that we offer, but every Job Corps offers different trades. Like in Long Beach, they offer cement masons, window installation, painting, facilities maintenance, but they also have a CNA program there and medical office. So what I mean is, if you don't hear about the trade that you want with us, you can look up a different Job Corps, and they have a different trade options as well. I see a raised hand from Rosario. Oh, that's it.
So just a quick question that
Mhm.
someone had. They went on the website and they had a question if there was any help for 35-year-old and up, low income.
So our age requirements are 16 to 24, but the exception to go beyond 24 years old is if you have a documented disability. So that is the loophole for us. So, you know, we have students that are 26 and they've entered the program. So as long as you get in by your birthday or you know, within the age range, you can be in the program for, I think, up to 2 years, and they do grant extensions sometimes depending on the situation. But it would have to be a documented disability for us to admit you if you're beyond the age of 16 to 24. So that's
Well, she's saying that she actually looks 24. So.
Oh, hey, you know, I don't know. I'm not going to say you should get a fake ID, but I can't encourage you to do that. But there is an intake process. Our center has a dorm and other centers have dorms. So that means we house a lot of our students. Because of the pandemic, we don't house as many just for safety reasons. But we used to house close to about 400 students on center, men and women. We keep them separate, well, males on one side and females on the other side. There's no co-ed, and there is a curfew and etc. That's if they choose to live on center. You don't have to live on center if you're in the program. You could be a commuting student where you're in the program and you still live at home. I mentioned distance learning is because a lot of our teaching has been moved online, or it's half online and half in the classroom. With the pandemic, we saw the big change with a lot of our partners who provide the training. So a lot of like LAUSD, that when they went online, our students went online as well, because if we don't teach it at our site, we're contracted with another school. We pay for the tuition, and you would go to that school and still use our services. It's all a part of the program through our training. We provide the preparation, the career readiness and placement. So we have a department that helps you prepare to find jobs and helps you look for the job. And even after graduation, I think for up to a year or 6 months, we have agents that are helping you look for a job in case you lose your job or you get quit or you get fired. Because we want to, as a part of our requirements as an institution, is to help you find a new job even after you've left for a certain amount of time. The students who are here get an allowance every 2 weeks, which is considered a pay. And then at the end of the program, if you complete properly and graduate, you do get a stipend of a couple $100. And then there is a budget for you to, we help take you to buy professional clothing, or in the professional clothing isn't just a suit and tie. If you're going to be in automotive or electrical, like a construction trade, that money would be then spent on like your work boots and your tools to make sure that you have what you need when you get that job. Our population is, the requirement is that you should be low income to be considered. You can be a permanent resident and not a citizen if you're a permanent resident. We've even had refugees from certain countries. It depends on your classification. I've had students from the Congo. I've had a student from Somalia, and they were learning English while they were here because we have a program for students where English is their second language. So they're learning English and they're here and they're trying to study and get their diploma and get their certifications, which we pay for the certifications as well. So, for example, the people who are becoming CMAs or CNAs, there's a phlebotomy option. So if the student says, oh, I want to do phlebotomy too, then you have to study. We'll pay for the test. You pass, then you get the certification to become a phlebotomist. So there's so many different options with us. And every Job Corps is a little different.
And Ebony, actually, one of the questions is, are these classes offered in other languages besides English?
Oh, that's a good question. Actually, no. So from what I am aware of, English is a predominant language for our trainings. When we have, I think the only time we're bilingual is when it's the ESL class. So usually in the introduction of the program, if you don't speak clear English, we'll put you in an English class. And so if the instructor can speak your language, and then we can do that. And I used to work with students where I would try to get the test translated so they could still take the test and pass. So for example, like I know for the high school equivalency, I used to help students who spoke Spanish take the high school equivalency text in Spanish. And then I was helping them learn the subjects in Spanish with the Spanish textbook. And they were able to pass because it was like the American requirements for a high school diploma, but it was in Spanish. So that's a scenario that could help someone, but for our trainings, they would be in English. So my last slide, because I think we should probably out of time, is how do you sign up? We are one of 7 in the state of California. If you don't want to go to LA or Long Beach, you could go to San Diego, Inland Empire, Sacramento, San Jose, Treasure Island. There's Job Corps in those cities. The website is listed there, and the phone number at 213 is our center, or the 800 hotline number is where you can call, and they will help you find another Job Corps. If you don't want to go to ours, they can give you all the information that you need.